Alright, welcome to a video on graphing absolute value equations. So our absolute value equations give us a different kind of curve than any of our other lines. It's our first time we're going to actually look at something like that. So this gives us a V-type curve. So it's either going to look like a normal V or an upside down V. We're going to start off by writing down some rules for this. So rule number 1, make sure it says y equals. So we still want the y to be by itself. We want to say y equals. Our rule 2, and you can also call these steps, I just wrote rules. Set what is inside the absolute value equal to 0. For example, if it says y equals the absolute value of x plus 1, then we say x plus 1 equals 0. This finds the top or bottom of our graph after solving. Next, we want to make an XY chart with the step 2 number as our middle x. So we're not just going to be able to list out a generic XY chart every time. Then we pick 2 numbers higher and lower to complete our x's. Step 4 is we use order of operations to fill out the chart, so that's not different. We just plug in our numbers, fill out our chart. Step 5, we graph the points and draw our curve. So let's go ahead and jump right in with an example. So we've got y equals the absolute value of x plus 1. So we're just going to go through with these steps. So step 1, we want to say y equals. It does. So step 1, y equals the absolute value of x plus 1. So no changes. Keeps getting all fuzzy on me. There we go. Step 2. We're going to set what's inside the absolute value equal to 0. So we have x plus 1 inside. So x plus 1 equals 0. So inside absolute value equals 0, then solve. So we subtract 1, so we get x equals -1. Step 3 is our XY chart. And we put our -1 in the middle. And then we pick 2 numbers lower and 2 numbers higher. So 0 and 1. -2, -3. And we like to pick things immediately higher. So we pick our x's. And then step 4 is we fill out the chart. So what we are going to do now is just fill it out like we did before. So we're going to use our y equals absolute value of x plus 1. And we're going to start out with the x equals -3. So it says y equals the absolute value of -3 plus 1. that should be an absolute value bar, sorry, which gives us the absolute value of -2, which is 2. So all we did there was just simplify. Then we do x equals -2, and we can put our positive 2 up here. Y equals absolute value -2 plus 1, -2 plus 1. So we did that to get that. -2 plus 1 gives us the absolute value of -1 equals +1. So we get a +1. We just keep on going with our x equals -1. So y equals the absolute value, -1 plus 1, which gives us the absolute value. -1 plus 1 gives us 0. Absolute value of 0 gives us 0. Then x equals 0. So y equals absolute value of 0 plus 1. 0 plus 1 is 1. The absolute value of 1 is 1. And finally, we do x equals 1. So y equals the absolute value of 1 plus 1. The absolute value of 2, which is 2. Now I want you to notice here, we got the same numbers here and the same numbers here. If you use this method of picking 2 immediately lower, 2 immediately higher, that will work out every time as long as you do your math right. You can go and do all this. It's not, it just takes more time. It's not more difficult. It just takes more time. And I encourage you to do this. But I will show you the other method on the next example. So to finish this off, we are going to graph. So step 5, graph our chart. So on our graph here, we're just going to put dots everywhere. So -3, 2, -2, 1, -1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 2. And you'll see that they line up. This is a symmetrical graph. And then we can draw out 2 straight lines out of it to make our V. So there we go. So all right, let's next go to another example. All right, our last example here looks a little bit different. It's got a number outside the absolute value. So that doesn't bother us. It's not like when we were solving where we have to move it. We get to keep it there as we go through everything. So step 1, it already says y equals, so we can just put y equals x absolute value of x plus 3 minus 2. No changes. Step 2, we just take what's inside the absolute value. So we take x plus 3 equals 0. We don't touch the minus 2. So we take just inside the absolute value equal to 0. So not the minus 2 here. And then we solve. So we subtract 3 to both sides. We get x equals -3. All right, now that we have that, we can start making our XY chart. So step 3, we get to start making our XY chart. And I really need to get better at doing these. -3. Okay. And we have a -3 there, so -4, -5, -2, -1. And the nice thing about this is that these are going to match. So that's the trick that we can do with these. So these match. So we picked our x's. Okay, and then step 4. Just to remind ourselves, it's y equals absolute value of x plus 3 minus 2. We can't forget the minus 2. We are going to now find our y's. So starting with, and you can pick either one of these. So I'm going to do the x minus 1 because that's a smaller number. So x equals -1. So I'm going to say y equals absolute value of -1 plus 3 minus 2. So just using our order of operations. The next thing we're going to get is the absolute value of 2. Got that from there. Bring our minus 2. I should be putting equal signs, shouldn't I? Sorry. Equal sign. Absolute value of 2 is 2. So that came from there. And then our minus 2. 2 minus 2 is 0. And this matches x equals -5. Now we can do x equals -2. So y equals absolute value, -2 plus 3 minus 2. So this -2 plus 3 gives us an absolute value of 1. Don't forget our minus 2. This equals 1 minus 2. 1 minus 2 is -1. And that matches -4. So -1, -1. And finally, we can do our x equals -3. Y equals the absolute value of -3 plus 3 minus 2. This -3 plus 3 gives us an absolute value of 0 minus 2. Absolute value of 0 is 0. 0 minus 2 is -2, and it doesn't match anything. And then step 5, we get to graph. So now we're just going to graph our XY chart on our graph. So we have -5, 0, -4, -1, -3, -2, -2, -1, and -1, 0. And we can draw our graph. And there we go.